Oh, wow, that's overwhelming. Oh, please. Please. It's, man, I feel upstage with all these young guys getting up here with all this cool stuff that they're doing and the things they're already accomplishing in life. So, you know, it's a great day for me, and I want you guys to know that I'm really humbled to be here. I met Dr. Green just a few days ago, and we were just having breakfast at a outing, and we got to converse, and he's like, hey, he says, I got this great opportunity for you. And I was like, okay. And he said one of our guys couldn't make the deal and asked me if I'd come and speak, and I was like, well, you know, give me an outline, give me something you want to talk about, because it's easy for me to talk. It's kind of what I do for a living, but, you know, do you have anything? He says, I have the best, I want to quote him, the best student body in the history of college is in America at ORU in my business class. And I'm kind of like, I'm not sure I want to talk to those guys. They probably are smarter than me. But like I said, I'm honored to be here, but just kind of a quick deal in looking at this. And I just want to tell you guys that part of business, and excuse me, I'm not good at these jacket deals. I told him I'd wear it and look good. But, you know, part of being a great leader, in my opinion, is your ability to roll up your sleeves, and that's what I'm going to do because it's hot, is roll up your sleeves and want to lead by example. So many people in entrepreneurial deals, they think being an entrepreneur is you get to sit back on your butts and tell other people what to do. And I'm just going to tell you, a great leader is you lead by example, not by what you say. And it's also that way in life. You guys obviously are way ahead of the curve and a lot brighter than most, and you guys are here at a great school under a great professor and doctor, and I just want you guys to know that you guys are already doing things that are cutting edge. The technology that you're using and the abilities that you have to change people's lives are amazing. But to lead, you got to lead by example, and you got to be willing to do whatever you're asking the other person to do standing next to you. In my case, it's detail a car for a customer if I'm the only guy standing there. And we're busy and we got to do it. It doesn't matter that my name's on the sign. We detail the car, get it to the customer, so they can get out of there, because we have to offer our customers something they can't get anywhere else. My Ford cars are no different than the other Ford cars at the other 3,300 Ford dealers in the nation. So what do we have to offer? It's got to be about the experience. And we're trying to deliver world-class experience. You know, a great football coach once stated that if we strive for perfection every day, we might achieve excellence. And that's just kind of become my mantra about what we're going to do. And we're already talked, we had a big, what we call a town hall meeting where I had all the employees today together, and we talked about 2013 and kind of what we want to accomplish in 2013. Much probably so like what you guys are talking about accomplishing. And that was kind of my deal to them, is we have to strive for perfection every day. And, you know, then we probably will achieve excellence. And when you guys go out in the business world, you are going to be faced with a society that I don't know where we as leaders went wrong, that everybody wants to do the minimal acceptable standard. So when you're setting targets or objectives and you're in a business, and if you want to achieve this level right here, then I'm going to tell you that you need to set a level of about right here. Because the average employee is going to do the minimal acceptable standard to get by and just get to right here. They're never going to get you over that goal. So you got to set your goal for more than what you want, because that's the way the culture is in today's world. Nobody really believes that you give a guy an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Nobody really believes that there's respect and acceptance in this deal if you're cooking hamburgers at McDonald's or digging a ditch on a plumbing rig or whatever it is. I'm going to tell you, you got to do whatever it is to the absolute best of your ability, because you owe it to that guy that's employing you or that's helping you get to where you want to give him everything you got every single day. And I will tell you, that's how you're going to be successful. And I know that you guys are going to graduate and you're going to have this beautiful piece of paper. And it's going to say that you guys are graduate and you're college graduates. And I'm going to tell you, that's not a success. That is a great accomplishment. Don't underestimate what I'm saying. That degree does not make you success. What you do out after that degree is what's going to make you a success. But that is a great accomplishment. I'm jealous because I don't have one. Okay? I barely made it through high school. I tried everything I could to quit. You know, my dad bribed me to finish with a nice, you know, well, I don't want to tell you guys because y'all probably weren't born yet, but a 1982 Pontiac Trans Am, and it had this really cool bird on the hood. And if you ever watched the movie Smoking the Bandit, that's what it was. And if I'd finished high school, he'd buy me this used Trans Am I found. And so I finished, because after football season, I was done. I was ready to quit. You know, the oil field was booming in western Oklahoma. I grew up in western Oklahoma, a little town called Thomas. It's about 15 miles north of Weatherford if you look up at a map. I graduated 32 kids in my high school class. For you guys in the deal, there's 17 girls. We had a good shot if you were 15 guys. I got out of that and kind of got in the oil field and thought, man, I don't have to go to school. I make a living. And then about a year and a half later, they deregulated gas and the oil field crashed back then. And, I went back to farming. That's what I did as a kid. Me and my wife had to move into Section 8 duplex in Thomas, Oklahoma. And times were tough. And you work your way through that, driving the tractor, working cattle, hauling hay, going on harvest. And you work your way back up. And, I knew there had to be more than life for me than that. And, and I moved to Oklahoma City and started selling insurance to kind of give you a quick, deal on me. And started selling insurance door to door for Mutual of Omaha. And, once again, school wasn't important. You had to pass this test. You had a temporary license, and I failed the test. And that was no big deal. I'll study. I'll pass it this next time. Got a 30-day reprieve, went and took it, didn't study much, failed the test. And the guy that owned the agency said, you're the best salesman I've ever had, but you can't work here any longer. You have to wait 6 months to be able to take the test again, and I can't get you another license. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I've got a wife at home in this apartment, a baby on the way, being irresponsible about my duties as a potential father and a husband. So I'm looking through the paper, and it said car sales and a car, and we only had one car. And I was like, wow, I can sell cars for 6 months and get a car to drive for 6 months, and then I can go back and sell insurance. 30 years later, I'm still selling cars. And I'm going to tell you that I'm selling cars because it became my passion. And one thing I'd like to challenge you guys with, that whatever you do in life, if you pursue what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't feel like I go to work any because I love to sell cars. And that might be odd for some of you. I love that experience. I love relationships that you develop in that scenario. And that's another thing, when you talk about where you guys are going, so much of y'all's world revolves in this. I know that you guys all have these on. They're probably on vibrate or silent because you're trying to be nice. But it's like when you feel it, it's like some convulsion comes over that, oh my gosh, I have to look at it. I got to look at it. I got to, and I don't know what it is about texting. Y'all have to tell me the psychology of that, because you can get an email and not answer it for days. But if you guys get a text, it's like, and I just don't know what that causes, because it causes me to have that problem too. But this right here will not make you successful. Once again, just like that degree you're going to get, it's something that's going to help you, and this can be a tool. But part of the world that we live in is getting, in my opinion, kind of dysfunctional. And the reason I say that is relationships in business are everything. And you hear little slogans sometimes, it's not what you know, sometimes it's who you know. So let me kind of play a scenario for you. In 1983, I started selling cars in Oklahoma City. And sold cars for about 2.5 years, and got an opportunity to get my first manager's job if I'd moved to Tulsa. My wife we just had a baby, our first baby. She had no car. We lived in a little house in Oklahoma City, and I don't know if any of y'all are from Oklahoma City, but it would be equivalent to maybe a project for some of you where you lived. I lived at Southwest 37th and Penn in Oklahoma City. In a little bitty house, and a guy took me to Tulsa. I interviewed for the job, got it. I called my wife and said, hey, I'm coming home to get my clothes. We don't have the money to move you here. I got to come to work. I got a manager's job, and I'm going to be able to make enough money to support us the way we need to. And so I ran home, got my clothes packed up, kissed her, kissed my boy, and I moved to Tulsa, moved into an apartment with the guy that worked at this dealership that got me the job as my first manager's job. And worked there for a few years with him. He's a great guy, a great company. The particular dealer hit about on some bad financial times and was going under, and I got an opportunity to go to work for the guys I was working for in Oklahoma City. Had bought a store here called Riverside Chevrolet. They'd bought it and built this new facility out west of town. And worked for them for a while, and worked my way from F&I manager to fleet manager to new car manager to used car manager, and back around, and finally thought, man, I'm ready to get a general manager's job. Took an 85% cut in pay. Okay, 85% cut in pay to get my first general manager's job at a little bitty town called Claremore up here north, at a little bitty dealership that the showroom floor dropped 8 feet between the piers because it had been built on a landfill. When it rained, there was 3 foot of water in the showroom floor, but I was the general manager. Because you had to get your experience. You had to cut your teeth somewhere, and that's the only person to give me that shot. So, I took that job and worked with the guy that owned it, and thought that's where I'd be forever. And I moved from Claremore to Owasso. We had a Chevy store in Owasso, and I ran it for a little bit. And one day, me and him got sideways, and I wasn't very good at giving in. And at that point in time, and I was very strong. I have very strong opinions about things, and I just stood my ground, and I just stood up and said, hey, I'm not going to do that. I appreciate the opportunity. I shook his hand and walked out. On my way home, you know, I'm praying and talking about what I'm going to do. Got to go tell my wife I quit my job, and things are great. And you know, kind of figuring out how that conversation is going to go. And a buddy of mine called me in the car on my way home, and I stopped by and talked to him. And all of a sudden, you know, I always call it what the enemy always means for bad. It's what the Word says, that God always turns for good. And got a phone call, and a guy in Oklahoma City at the Huderberg family called me. I worked for there, and they said, hey, we want you to go run our Nissan store, and we want to sell you a part of it, and you be a partner. And I was like, that's great, but it takes money to buy stock. And they said, well, we can help you arrange that with you for a banker, and I did it. Worked that store for 5 years. We sold it to a big public company. I made a little bit of money. You know, it was really interesting when you grew up as a kid what you thought it took to retire, and I thought, man, I hit that number, and then I realized, well, that won't really retire me. So, you know, I'm like, okay, I got to do something else. So I worked for the company that bought us, a big public company, Fortune 200 company called Sonic Automotive. I went to work for them on the corporate side. It's kind of like that MasterCard commercial, priceless experience. I got to look at the world from a completely different point of view, from a private ran business to a public ran business. And went to work for those guys for about 4 years, and the Ford store came out in the paper that the Ford store sold. And I don't know how much y'all know about the Ford stores here, but they had all sold to Ford, and Ford as a manufacturer thought they could run the dealerships better than entrepreneurs. And they had the #1 market share in the market in 1997 when they bought them from the individual operators. In 2004, when I got there, they had lost 80% of their market share and were losing money at every single one of them. And it came out in the paper that they were going to disband them, and some individual guys were going to buy them. Well, I happened to know one of the guys that had supposedly bought the one out in West Tulsa, and I called him, told him congratulations. He said, well, I don't think I really want to do it. And I said, hey, I want to buy it. And I know it's a long story to get back to relationships, but while I was working at Sonic, every time we had these big corporate meetings, there was always this older guy that always at the end of all the meetings, you could always find him at the bar. I didn't drink. I went to the bar to hang out with all the guys, and he always sat at the corner, and he was sitting there, and he always had this drink up there, and he was always kind of lonely, and nobody had talked to him. So me, being Mr. Conversational, because I'm not drinking and partying to all the other guys, I walk up to him, and I park myself and order me a Coke, and I start talking to him. And we just kind of befriended each other over these 4 years. Now, 4 years fast forward back to where I was at, I called the guy, he didn't really want it. I said, would you mind if I called Ford and told him I wanted it? He said, no, go right ahead. So I called Ford, and I said, hey, Mr. Dale, I got a hold of the president or the vice president of the region in Dallas, and I said, hey, my name's Bob Hurley. I think I make a great Ford dealer in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Would you send me an application? Because I'd like to take Dan Offenberg's place, was the gentleman that bought it. He said, Bob, it's not going to matter. If Dan doesn't take it, I've got a list on a legal pad of people that already got their paperwork in, pre-approved. I got to move fast. We don't have time to put you through the process and all that. And I said, well, you know, I'm telling you, I don't care who's on your list. I'd be better. You know, I'm selling my, you know, my bottom off. So anyway, trying to get him to do it 4 or 5 times, he tells me no. Now, you guys got to understand, in my world, no is I just haven't given you the right information for you to change your mind to say yes yet, okay? So I'm still talking to him on the phone and getting him nowhere, and so I get frustrated, and I get off the phone, and I call the president of Sonic Automotive that I was working for to say, hey, I think I'm going to buy this Ford deal. I don't know how yet, but I think I'm going to buy it. And I said, but I'm having trouble with the deal. And he says, well, you know Bill Egan, don't you? And I said, sure. So me and Bill are buddies. He said, call Bill. He knows somebody in the Dallas region. So I called Bill, and I said, hey, Bill. And I'm not going to repeat the vocabulary this guy used when you called, but I called and said, he goes, hey, what are you doing? You know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm not doing much. And I said, hey, I need to know, do you know somebody at Ford? And he goes, yeah, I know the guy that runs it. I've known him forever. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, I said, call him and tell him I'll be a good Ford dealer. And he goes, well, what happened? And I said, well, I called his understudy, and he's telling me I can't send an application, won't accept it, won't talk to me, doesn't matter, it's impossible. And he says, well, give me just a few minutes, let me see what I can do. I don't know if there's anything I can do. 2 hours and 30 minutes later, I got a phone call from the same guy that turned me down for an hour on the phone. He says, it's 3:30. The application has to be on my desk by 10:30 tomorrow morning in Dallas. And I said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, you've just been moved to the top of the list. Relationship. Everybody you come in contact with is relationship. Now, I will tell you that I walk in absolute unmerited favor because God gives it to me with everybody I come in contact with. So don't take this out of complete contents. But God also puts people in your life for that time that relationship will become important. And so make relationships, because this phone, I would have never known Bill Egan, because this has no feelings and no emotions and no understanding and a complete up for interpretation of what you just sent me really meant. This is great technology, but it is not how the world turns. Okay? I could have Skyped in and done this if this was how technology would work, and y'all could have watched it on the nice video screen. Would not have been the same thing, because you would not see me, hear me, or understand where I'm coming from on this. Use relationships, because in business, relationships are everything. It's how you find the next great thing. Hey, we're launching this. You need to be ready for this. Hey, this is coming up. You ought to be looking for this. And listen, and keep your deal, because relationships are everything. Back into relationships. Now, I got an application in. Filled it out overnight, got there at 10:30. Now, next thing in an entrepreneurial deal, you have to raise money. I didn't have enough money. So I put this nice big book together, and we sit at my kitchen table, me and my wife and a friend of ours, my business partner and his wife, and she was a CPA, and we're doing all this stuff. And like I said, I'm IT challenged, so she's working the computer, and I'm telling her this is what to put, and we need to put these business projections together and these performance together and put this big book together. And so I head off, the day after we get to Kinko's and run all the copies and put it in the binder, and I'm going to the bank. I'm going to get money. And I go to a bank here in town. I'm not going to say what bank it was, but the president of the bank took a meeting with me, because one of the head loan officers was a friend of mine. And we pitched it, and he was the second guy I pitched it to, and he says, I'm in. I'm like, great. Now, I've got some money, because I'd sold the Nissan store, and I kept it over the 4 years I worked for him. And, and you got to understand that when I sold the Nissan store, everything in mine and my wife's lives we were debt-free for the first time ever, with the exception I left some money on my house so I could write off on my taxes, because in the world we live in, that was the only thing left as an individual you can write off. So I had about 75% equity in my house. And it was a nice house, and probably way more house than was necessary for any human being on planet to have. One of my bad decisions I made in my life. But it was a nice house, and I had it paid down, and we were great. So I go to the bank, and he says, hey, I'm in. I was like, okay, great, because I'd promised my wife, for the women in the room, you all like to feel protected. So we had money for the first time. Now, you got to understand, I married my wife, and we lived in a Section 8 duplex, okay? 25 years later, we got some money in the bank, and we're ready to, do something different. So her deal was, if you want to buy your deal, I just don't want to risk all of what we have, but you can risk some of what we have. And I'm like, okay, great, banker's in. So I have to write a check to negotiate with these guys. It's a non-refundable deposit, and it was in excess of a six-figure check. And I'm hoping you guys college graduates know what that means, okay? So, I had to write a check to start the negotiations, and it's non-refundable, so I did it knowing that I had the money financing. So we get into the deal. He says he'll finance it. I negotiate. I get to a price. I give him the buy-sell agreement. This is how much money I need, and we've got this much money we're going to put down, in with the loan, and you need to finance the rest. Okay, no problem. I think we can get that done. I got to take it to my guys, and we'll get it done. I've got 4.5 weeks before we close. 2 weeks later, I still don't have an answer. So now I'm down to 2.5 weeks left, and I call this loan officer gal who's a friend of mine for 15 years. Her name was Patty. I said, Patty, it's a Friday afternoon. I said, I'm really getting nervous. I still don't have the letter, and Ford's requesting this letter because I have to verify that I've got guaranteed funds to close, and I don't have it. And she said, Bob, he said he'd do it. He's never backed down on a deal yet. I've known him for 20 years, and he's got your back. Man, you and Dana, just go somewhere this weekend and relax. It might be your last weekend to relax for a little bit, and we'll get together our money. I said, great. So knowing Patty for 15 years, I was like, great. Me and my wife go on the weekend. We have a nice trip. I come back Monday. My phone rings, and there's somebody bawling hysterically on the other line. I'm like, trying to figure out who it is. I didn't recognize the number, and I started to realize it was Patty, and she was crying. And I was like, well, Patty, what's the matter? Because I knew Ed, her husband. I was like, is Ed all right? The kids all right? Whatever. She said, I just quit my job. And I was like, well, why would you do that? She said, because he's not going to do your loan. And I promised you he would, and he promised you he would, and I can't work for a guy like that. And I'm like, whoa, you don't got to quit your job for me. You got a family. You do know I'm not going to work anywhere it's dishonest. And I call the guy, and sure enough, he decides he's not going to do the deal. I'm 2.5 weeks out, and just to give you in perspective, I need, I don't want to get you too much in my world, multiple seven-figure number, okay? Okay? I need a lot of money. So I'm like, okay, and I was like, where are those books at? Well, I need those books. I got to go start pitching again. But that was what my first fleshly instinct was. I got to go pitch. But then I just kind of got this, this big feeling about it, and I drove to where I go to church at. Sanctuary was closed, air conditioner wasn't off. I walked in, said hi to the gal at the reception desk. I walked around the corner. I went in the sanctuary, and I sit in the pew. And I don't guess they're pews. We have chairs like you guys have here. They're not pews. But I sit in the pew in the absolute dark, and it's September 20th. It's 110 degrees outside, and it's 200 degrees in that building. And I'm sweating, and I'm just got my hands up, and I'm praying, going, you got to help me out of this deal. Because I am not going to go home and tell my wife that I lost a 6-figure check because I had something done that's not there. And, and I need you to do it. And I was there for about 30 minutes left, totally wringing awake. The lady at the switchboard is looking at me like, what in the world have you been doing? And I was like, I just got baptized in there, as I was sweating, So I walk out, and I get in my car, and as I'm leaving the parking lot, man, just this great deal says, you ought to talk to the friend I had. And I'm like, okay, I got the book in my car. And I was like, okay, so I called, and he said, yeah. I said, hey, are you and Paul there? And he goes, yeah, and I drove to their house. And I laid this book out on the table. I said, I got this great opportunity for you. You can be my partner. I wasn't going to have any, but I'm going to open up for partnership so I can raise some money, and I got to do it. Great news is your percentage of ownership is this. That's going to cost you this. The other good news is you're going to get to be my partner, and you have to loan me this much money so that I can buy all the stock that I want to buy. Now, there's not a business guy in the world in a normal situation that'd say yes to that, but God's grace and favor, he said yes. Who did I make the check out to? I was like, cool, that was half. So I'm back in my car going, okay, that was great. Now what I do, another name pops in my head. I call him. He lives in Edmond, which wasn't very convenient. I said, are you there? And he said, I'm in my office. I said, how long are you going to be there? He said, 2 hours. I said, I can be there in an hour and 30 minutes, no problem. 85 mile an hour down the highway. I walk in his office, kind of throw the book down. Hey, good news is you're going to be a partner of Ford store. Your share is this. This is what your share is going to cost. And the other good news is you have to own me this so I can own more of the store than you. And he says, okay, who do I make the check out to? So in an afternoon, I raised the money to close on the Ford store, with the exception that now I have one other person I have to close. Honey, I have to pull every dollar we own out of savings, every dollar we own with the exception of 1 month of bills out of the checking account, and I have to refinance my house to 125% of its value, and we're going all in. Now, for you guys that are thinking about a successful business, that probably sounds good. But now let me paint the picture. I bought a store that was selling 40 cars a month. It had 14 employees on 9 acres with 75,000 square foot of facilities, losing $2 million a year for 3 years in a row. And you go tell your wife, trust me, I got this. We're going all in. And her question was, are you sure? And I said, I don't know, but I said, I think God is, because I got to the first of the list and I wasn't supposed to. I got the money raised I wasn't supposed to, and all that's left is you. And we prayed about it, and she said, she's like, let's go all in. And we went all in. And 8 years today is our 8-year anniversary at the Ford store, and she was very nice. There's a guy in town that advertises he's the #1 Ford store in the state, and by one aspect of the business he is. And you'll find as you guys start dealing with marketing people, with the radio stations and the television stations, they will walk in and they will tell you they're #1. And you'll learn through Nielsen and Scarboroughs and Arbitrons and Gigatrons and Robotrons and Microtrons and all the kind of things they'll show you. They are #1 between 215 and 225 on Mondays with females 30 to 60, okay? Not necessarily your target audience or that, because that's how they always have to pitch it, okay? So he is #1 in a certain segment, but we are the #1 overall volume Ford dealer in the state, and I can tell you I have an incredible 126-person staff now, not 14. And the stores, to kind of give it, because I think you guys probably deal in revenues, we're going to probably at the Ford store this year probably eclipse $140,000 in annual sales. And then I have a Buick and GMC store that's not near that big, but the Ford store, when you throw in new retail Fords, units sold to governmental agencies, fleets, commercial trucks, and that, we're by far To put it in perspective, out of 3,300 Ford dealers, we're in the top 300 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, and I can tell you, it's not anything that I did. I assembled a great staff of people. And I got down and rolled up my sleeves with them from every morning to every night until we could turn it around and get it to go. And you lead by examples, and they saw me working 12 hours a day, and they didn't mind to work 12 hours a day. They saw me cast a vision and know that I had to succeed because failure wasn't optional, to go back to my nice wife of 30 years now and tell her that it wouldn't work. And they did it. And so I don't feel like that I am anything of a success story other than the fact that I think if you have a vision and you are passionate about what you want to do, and one of the things that my pastor coined that I thought has been a great phrase for me is you either win or you quit. And I had no option to quit, because literally if we would have quit, we'd have been living at the YMCA. And that's a motivation. I call that motivation from self-indebtedness. Not a great motivating thing, okay? So I'm not suggesting that you go do that, but, it puts you in a position where, you don't think about ever failing. And, to stand here and talk to you, and the one thing I want to caution you guys about, I had a lot of college graduates in my path to where I'm at. And a lot of those guys have come to me and said, how did you do it? Because they were higher than me or equivalent to me when I first got into business. Because I started out selling cars. I'm not a dealer's son. I'm not a grandparent. I didn't have them any money. We started out that way. And I'm just going to tell you that hard work overcomes a lack of ability every single time. And you're going to be working next to somebody that doesn't have a college degree. And I got to a point where I resented people with them, because there was a time in my life I would have got out of the car business because I had this thing that I wanted to be a better father, because my shift when I first got in the car business was 9 to 9, 6 days a week. And I had a baby at home. Okay? So understand, I wanted to do something different. And back in the mid-'80s, there was this time, and I'm sure Dr. Green can attest to it, that if you didn't have a college degree with that piece of paper, you couldn't even get into interview with someone. It was like a rite of passage, and I resented it. And so I wanted to annihilate anybody that had one of those pieces of paper, okay? And my point is, there's going to be somebody like me next to you that might resent that, and don't think that piece of paper is going to make you the person they're going to promote. You got to be the one that works harder, that tries harder, because the Word says we're supposed to be servants in everything we do. And that means that you volunteer when there's a project at work. You always are the person that comes early, stays late. You're always the person that, and here's the deal, don't ever tell me it's not in your area. Don't tell me that that's the way we've always done it. Don't tell me that that's not your deal. If you're in my building and there's a ball on the ground, or the ball's been fumbled, or whatever analogy you want to use, you pick it up, we run for the touchdown, we'll circle back around later and figure out who dropped the ball and fix it. But get the ball up, get it in the hoop, get it in the end zone to take care of my customer. I don't care how it got dropped. Drop ball's irrelevant. Getting the ball up off the ground and going where it's supposed to go with it's the important part. So don't say it's not in your section. Don't say it's not my area. Don't say it's not my responsibility. Don't ever tell me you don't get paid to do it. Okay? Okay? And that's my deal is you have to go over and above everyone else around you at any job that you have. That's how you'll go up the ladder of life. That's how overachievers do it. And entrepreneurs are the best at it. And let me tell you something about entrepreneurs, and I'll close with this and let you guys open it up for deal. The failure rate for entrepreneurs in the United States is catastrophic. I'm sure you probably have some numbers on it. And I'm going to tell you, and I don't know what you've been taught, so if I'm contradicting your teaching, I apologize. Most small businesses and most entrepreneurs do not fail because they had a bad idea, do not fail because they don't have a good marketing strategy, do not fail because they don't have a good product, do not fail because they don't have a good location. They fail for a lack of capital, because I'll never forget, we were in business. We opened up in October of 2004, and based on the letter from Ford, they have a recommended required capitalization. And that's what we put in the bank. Because obviously I didn't have a lot of money. I gave them as low a number as they'd let me put in there. 14 months later, we're out of business. Not because we didn't sell enough cars, not because we weren't given a good deal, because we were selling so many cars, I outran my capital base. You guys understand that? Because let me explain something about the car business that's probably different than most businesses that you guys have. Let's just take, for you guys with math, that are good at math, take a $40,000 car that I sell to this young man right here. He has a 2005 Chevrolet Tahoe that he's trading in. This $40,000 car I'm selling him has a $5,000 rebate from the manufacturer. Okay? When he buys that car, he paid me $40,000 for it, less $5,000. He paid me $35,000, okay? Now he's got a trade-in, Tahoe. It's worth $10,000, but he owes $15,000. In our industry, about 98% of the people have what we call negative equity. Now they got a lot of slang terms, hooked, buried, blah, 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 but it's called negative equity in the real world, okay? And so he finances his $35,000. I take his $5,000 of the negative equity and I finance $40,000 for him and I contract him. Okay? Everybody follow? Here's the issue. I own the car. I sold him for $40,000. I own it for $38,000. So you guys immediately think I sold it and made $2,000 profit, right? You guys would think that's $2,000 of the cash flow. But in math, you guys got to understand it. Within 72 hours of when I sold him that $40,000 car that I owned for $38,000, I got to pay the bank that I borrowed the $38,000 from to buy it. Okay? So I paid them $38,000. Now, the manufacturer, I had to give him $5,000 off of the $40,000, so he paid me $35,000, if you remember. Now, I have to wait for the manufacturer to pay my $5,000, so my transaction was a $2,000 profit, now became a $3,000 negative cash flow transaction. Okay? I have to pay the $15,000 he owed, which goes over to that. Now it's an $18,000 negative cash flow transaction. And I can floor plan his used car if you're financially strong enough, but a lot of dealers can't. So we're going to say from math. So I sold that car thinking I made $2,000, but I actually had to take $18,000 out of my pocket and pay to the bank. And I got to wait 90 days to get the $5,000 back, which turns it into a $13,000 deal. And then when I sell the used car, if I sell it for more than $15,000, then I get all my profit back. Now, times that in 14 months when I opened up, by 200 units a month at $18,000 negative cash flow transaction times 200, I didn't have that much capital. So what do? You start screaming at my partners again, hey, we need more capital. Okay, well, I'm all in. So we were lucky enough that I could argue the case that we outgrew the capital, not because we managed it bad, not because we did it, and I went to a bank and found somebody that loaned us some capitalization money. All right? But remember that. Most great ideas and most small businesses don't fail because it's a bad idea or any other deals. Most of the time they outgrow their capital base and they go broke because they can't find capital. So when you're looking at a deal, make for sure that you always overcalculate what operating capital you need so you have some cushion. Because that's where most people don't calculate it. I don't know if that's a good teaching, but that's my one thing about starting your own business is make sure you have enough operating capital for 2 to 3 times the amount of volume that you think you're going to do. Because if you're like me and you believe in what God's Word, it says everything you put your hands to will prosper. Everything you ask God for without receiving any doubt in your heart, you'll receive. Okay? So I'm praying on it every night. I need supernatural flow of business. I got it. Then I just wasn't ready for it. Okay? Now I need more capital. And, he was faithful to that. So I don't know what you wanted, but that's kind of... I go to Guts Church. I don't hide that. I've been there 13 years, and it's a great place for me. I've enjoyed going. Can you unlock me? I don't want to know your passcode. I wasn't prepared for, I'm not smart enough to have a lockout code. You know, just kind of in a spiritual aspect for me, just some verses, if you guys want to write these down, that I think are great things for me. I'm going to call these my confession verses that I talk about every day. Philippians 4:19. I really like it in the Amplified Version, but it's great in the Message Version or New King James. Ephesians 3:20, Amplified and New King James. Those kind of fall under what I call my confessions. Romans 12:2. I really like it in the Amplified and Message Bible, and I confess these deals every day. I call things that come up, tests, trials, or tribulations. I like James 1, verse 2 in the Message and Amplified Bible. But where I seem to find myself most of the times are in what I call wars or battles. 2 Corinthians 10:3 in the Message and Amplified is great. Psalm 18:39 in the New King James and Amplified is great. Psalm 55:18 in the Message Bible is fantastic. And then I get into confessions, and I want to confess, a lot of people that I look at, to be a great entrepreneur, you have got to have great confidence. And it's amazing what the Word says about confidence in Psalm 27:3, Philippians 1:6, Hebrews 10:35. And, I'm going to tell you that you got to be confident in everything that you do in life. So, those are just some verses that I stand on pretty much every day, that I talk about and confess and pray on. So with that, man, I'll just open up the floor for you guys that have questions and anything y'all would like to hear. Yes, sir.
Do you read very much?
Yes.
What kind of books do you read?
I read a lot of books. One of the books I just read that I think, I'm a guy, when I read, I don't always read business books. I read a lot of books that I think is qualities that's going to make me a better human being or a better man, because I'm always in the man side. I just read a great book by a guy named Jay Wilkinson called Dear Jay, Love Dad. And Jay Wilkinson is Bud Wilkinson's son. And Bud Wilkinson, in my opinion, is one of the greatest football coaches of all time. If you're an OU fan and you're old enough to know who that is, Bud Wilkinson, national career football coach, 83.7% victories. So he won a whole lot of games. And Jay Wilkinson wrote that book, and it's about letters that his father wrote to him as he was a kid, really pretty much where you guys are at in your lives. Really, it's a great time, because the book was written to Jay when Jay was transitioning from Norman High School. He went to Duke University and then to graduate school and theology school. And it's a great time that Bud wrote letters to him. Another great book that I like is, it's an old book that's been rewritten. It's called, for the girls, it's probably not going to be very deals, but I'd say this for the girls, you ought to read it so you know what kind of man you want to find in your life. Maximize Manhood. It is a book that probably for you guys, the first few chapters are probably going to sound a little old school, but the last 4 chapters have been added to and did it. It's a great book. I'm a big Kenneth Blanchard fan. I was talking to one of you guys earlier about changing the name. And I said, don't get stuck like the book Who Moved My Cheese. It's a little quick read. If you've got kids, you could read it with them. It's funny. It's about mice scurrying around and their cheese being moved. And it's kind of a deal, and it has a lot of great meaning to it. Man, you caught me kind of caught up off guard. But most of the books that I read are centered around me becoming a better person. Because my deal is, and just kind of give you some deals, it's if I can help my key people in my company, and one of the things that I've really worked on is the migration in the last months from these guys considering themselves managers. Because I really don't need them to manage anything, I need them to lead. And there's a big difference between a good manager and a leader. And trying to get them to understand that transition from them going to that next level of being a good manager to being a great leader is kind of where we're at in our growth in our company right now. It's trying to get them to understand there's a big difference. And so we're reading those books collectively as my managers, and we actually meet once a week, and I buy their lunch and I talk about a chapter of a book or a couple of chapters and let them share with me what they got out of it, and kind of in front of each other, and just kind of that open door forum where once they get past the embarrassment or whatever about how it affected them or how it did it, because it's amazing how many people in the world have daddy, mommy issues. That's another thing I'd like to tell you guys. man, if you don't get anything out of this class, this would be it. I don't care where you came from. I don't care how you were raised. I don't care how abusive, neglectful, hurtful, harmful it was. You all have reached a time in your life where you guys are adults. Okay? Take it to the altar, drop it off, and leave it, and get rid of the baggage. Because the Word says that, behold, all things become new. You're a new creation in Christ. All old things are passed away and gone, and behold, all things become new. Don't sit your rest of your life feeling sorry for yourself. I can't believe my dad did that, or my mom did that, or I'm underprivileged, or I lived in the project, or hey, I don't want to hear about it. Okay? All right? It's irrelevant. Let it go, because you have a choice to live your life today, starting today. Today's the first day of the rest of your life, every day. So you make the choices of what you want to do. Okay? Other questions? Yes, ma'am. You. I'm up.
Okay. You say either quit or you quit. So in the beginning of that statement, you have an exit strategy, or you know you back
You know, there wasn't an exit strategy for me, because my deal of it is that if you subconsciously allow yourself to think about an exit strategy, you're probably going to quit and take the door. Does that make sense? You know, my exit strategy was the YMCA, if there was one. I mean, and I'm not saying that to be smart aleck. I'm telling you it's the truth. Because I mean, every dollar we had was done. So, you know, to me, failure couldn't be something I considered. Yes, sir.
When the 2008 recession happened, how did that change the way you looked at your business, and did it affect you at all?
It affected us catastrophically. I'm a pretty blunt guy, pretty straightforward. I don't, and my pet peeves are: don't be late. Excuses are like belly buttons. Everybody's got one. Don't care. And okay, yeah. Is that something he said? I got off track thinking about him over there. Can't. I hate people that say I can't. And if you tell me you're going to do something, I expect you to do it. Okay? So I never have a problem. And lazy people, oh my gosh. Okay, number one pet peeve of mine. So I never had a problem firing somebody. Matter of fact, I enjoyed it if you were lazy or did one of those. It was like an enjoyment for me. The biggest thing for me in 2008 was having to sit down with someone like you that was probably with me for a few years, that was dependable, reliable, quality person, did a great job, and have to sit down in front of you and say, I failed you as an owner because I, for the first time in my life, can't sell my way to where I need to be. And the only way for me to survive is to restaff my company. And I can't help it that I can't keep you. Hardest day of my life. I went through a massive restructuring and cut at both stores in 2 days, and was days that I hope that I never have to go through, because for the first time ever, I had to look somebody in the face and I felt like I failed them because I couldn't figure out a way to keep them. And I probably kept people 6 months longer than I needed to, so I let it get to the point of pure survival before I did it, because I just kept thinking, man, I can overcome this. And it got to a point to where and really Ford wasn't as bad at Ford, but you want to talk about great business timing? Buy a Buick Pontiac GMC deal in November of 2007, and they filed bankruptcy after you spent $250,000 remodeling and showroom from December through March and having a grand opening in April, and they filed bankruptcy in July. Great timing to buy GM store. And by the way, when they did the reorganization, they said, we're going to close Pontiac. So they took a third of my franchises away that I paid based on blue sky of profitability when you buy a company and how you structure it. And they took 33% of my franchise away and gave me $46,000 for it and said, we're closing it. So in that recessionable time, A lot of great car dealers failed. Guys named Bill Hurd. If you guys want to Google him, he was the largest Chevy dealer in the world. Had about 60 dealerships at the time. Denny Heckler, another guy that did. And a lot of those guys lived very flamboyant, extravagant lives, jets and planes, because the car business was very lucrative in the latter 80s through all the 90s and up to about 2005. It was very, very lucrative. I just didn't happen to be in that time frame when I was an owner. And those guys made a whole lot of money. And they spent a whole lot of money. But those times where we lost a lot of great operators, because what you found out, they weren't great operators. They had great brands in great locations and could survive. And so the real businessmen and real car guys showed through and made it through. I'd say it made me have to look at expenses harder weekly, not quarterly or annually, weekly, manage them. Take every position in the dealership that was more of a luxury for other people, that really wasn't a necessity, that position wasn't going to sell me a car. You know, you've got productive employees and non-productive employees. And obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, you only want productive employees. Unfortunately, there's always some sort of support people that you need. And we had a whole lot more support people than what we had to have to sell cars, but they were luxury positions, so you eliminated those first. So you just had to take a real hard look at it, you know, figure out. Because the other thing is car dealers, you know, turn on your TV, what do you hear? Car commercial. That'll do it. Call Bob. You know, whatever. I mean, they're there everywhere. You know, Keystone Chevrolet. I mean, you know, they're everywhere. You can't get away from a car guy ad, and then Ford, Dodge. You got what, about 60 nameplates now? You know, when I first got in the car business in 82, you had like 12. Okay? So if you're watching television or listening to radio, you're hearing some sort of car ad. You have to change your marketing. Because the problem is we kept trying to spend the same amount of marketing, think, man, we just got to change the message. We got to, you know, people aren't doing it. People went in hibernation mode. You know, they went in retreat mode. We're taking money off the table, we're pulling back and not doing it, and you had to get to that point where your ego had to get out of the way. So the first thing I'd say I'd do is to check my ego, that I can't just, this is not something I can just plow through like normal. So we had to readjust expenses, readjust staff, readjust inventory levels, because in our business, the three most expensive things: advertising, interest, which is floor plan. For y'all that don't know that, floor plan is the banks that floor the cars, because I don't own all those cars on the ground. I know y'all might think that. You know, you want to sleep at night, think about owing a bank $30 million for a whole bunch of cars that are sitting there. That you're responsible for, by the way, and staff. Those are the three most important things pretty much in my business. And unfortunately, in the car business, inventory is catastrophically a big part of it. Okay? And for most businesses, they don't have near that carrying cost that we do in our industry. So, you know, you had to adjust everything. So it was a very tough time to get through. And the Ford store, like I said, wasn't bad. But, hey, I'm telling you, people avoided that GM store out there like it was the plague. I'm never buying a General Motors product because you took my great-grandkids' taxes. You're not, they bailed them out. I'm never going to buy that. You know, they're not, I've heard everything about why they're not going to buy that I ever want to hear, I hope, okay? And it's like I didn't bail them out. You know, it wasn't me that pulled the button to say give them the money, okay? I will tell you this, despite what people think, if they wouldn't have been bailed out, what I'm calling this speed bump we went through in 08 and 09, because trust me, folks, it wasn't a depression. If you want to check history, you'll know what a depression is. When you're in a food line, living in a tent, fighting for your food, that's a depression. Going from 5 cell phones to 1 and still having cigarettes and beer in the refrigerator and food on the table and living in an apartment, maybe you didn't have all the things you wanted, that wasn't a depression. That was a mild recession. But for the first time, it was a recession that went coast to coast and as far north and south as you could do. Okay? If they wouldn't have bailed out GM and Chrysler, you would have went from a mild recession to an absolute deep recession, because the ripple effect of all of the jobs lost and all the revenue streams and all the suppliers, because if the car dealers wouldn't have, the manufacturers wouldn't have bailed out, you'd had all the employees that work for them in the United States that are unemployed. All the parts supply houses across the United States that supply parts to Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge, they have 70% commonality, which means that they sell 70% of those same parts branded differently to all the manufacturers. So you'd have had all the employers and all the parts suppliers in the United States go broke. Then you'd had the fabrication people that fabricate the stuff that went broke. Then you would, I mean, it's an ongoing chain. Then you got paint suppliers that provide the paint that wouldn't have done it. You've got the tire manufacturers that would have lost all their employees. So you got to understand that the ripple effect, we're not talking about, 100,000 jobs in the automobile industry. You were talking about 1 million jobs in the United States. So you'd have went from what I call a mild recession, and it's probably more than a mild recession because, like I said, it reached coast to coast. You'd have been borderline deep recession. I don't think you'd hit depression levels, but it would have been a major catastrophic deal. Now, good news is Chrysler's paid government all the money back. Bad news is GM hasn't. Okay? So hopefully they'll get to that point where they can do it. But Chrysler's paid it all back. Because if you want to study a guy that's a sharp guy, Marcone, the guy that's running Fiat and Chrysler, he's a sharp cookie. They interviewed him one night on 60 Minutes or 2020. He said that was the first note we paid because the government was charging him 19.75% interest on that money. Now you take a B in $1 billion and charge 20% interest, you don't want to know what that compounds out to. Okay? So he paid that note off. So Chrysler paid back all the money. And I'll be truthful about it. I didn't think they could save Chrysler. That guy is a rock star. Al Manali at Ford was a rock star that did it. I'm not sure that General Motors, and I don't want to get into political debate, but with the control that the government has on General Motors, I'm not sure they can do what they need to do to get there. Because they're not going to get a CEO like Sergio Marcone or Alan Manali to go to General Motors with the fingers that the government's got in what the decisions are being made. They ain't going to. I don't know any true leader that's not going to go that doesn't have 100% control. I'm going to make the call. We're going to do it this way, and this is where we're headed. So, people are talking about Ford, and what people don't understand is the reason that Alan was at all those meetings with the guys from GM and Chrysler begging for the bailout money was because he knew if they didn't get the money, Ford would go under because we'd lose all our suppliers. You can't build a car and sell a car if you can't get one built. So he was there defending them, even though he didn't need the money and Ford didn't take any money. But you guys need to understand, it was a timing deal for Ford. Alan Manali came on board with Ford 18 months before the deal failed, before the recession hit. Back then, you could borrow money. He had enough foresight to understand that for Ford to fix their problems, they had to have a lot of cash to retool, re-engineer, and do all the things they needed and bring all the consolidation into the deals. He went to the market then, and for the first time ever, leveraged what they call the blue oval. You guys have heard that on news. He actually leveraged all-in chips where Ford Motor Company would have been out of business if his plan wouldn't have worked. And the family had never, ever allowed anybody to do that. And he hawked it all. And all the people at General Motors, me being one of those guys looking at it going, what is this guy thinking? Because they're like, why did he borrow that money? And he's got it in this account sitting over and he's paying interest on it. Why? 18 months later, you know why? Because he wasn't standing in the line going, I need a loan. Because GM could have borrowed the money, but the problem is the credit crisis dried up all the money. It wasn't that Chrysler and General Motors didn't have assets to go borrow against. There was no bank that loaned them the money at the time. And quite frankly, any good banker probably wouldn't have loaned them any more money because if they'd loaned them the money, they probably wouldn't have restructured and redid what they did. So, but Sergio Marcone's a great guy to study. Alan Manali's got a couple great books. You were asking about books. Bill Ford wrote a book called Ford Tough. It's a great book. And, he doesn't get a lot of credit for Ford's resurgence. And I think it's way understated because a fifth-generation Ford had to turn over the family's business to an unknown guy because Bill Ford could have fixed it. He's just such a nice guy. He didn't want to look you in the face, you being a fifth-generation family person working for Ford, and say, I got to cut your pay 50%, and I got to close the plant that your granddaddy worked in and your daddy worked in, and I got to lay your dad off and put him in early retirement. He didn't want to have to go through those things that Alan was willing to do. And so I give Bill Ford a ton of credit for stepping aside and letting Alan surgically disassemble and reassemble the deal. Because I'm not sure I would let you take over my family business to do that. And so he stayed on the sidelines and has let him do it. He's done a fabulous job. Other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned having great partners and really building a great team for yourself. But what else? What are some other key things you did to go from being in such like a deep hole to being the top 10% in the nation? You have to empower your people
when you hire somebody, it's easy to assemble great people. But you can't assemble great people if you're going to hire them and micromanage them and put them in handcuffs and not let them be. I have my fleet guy's an ex-general manager at an automobile dealership. My new car manager is an ex-general manager at a dealership. My assistant new car manager is a general manager at a dealership. My internet manager is an ex-general manager at a dealership. My used car manager is an ex-general manager, and one of them's an ex-general sales manager. Those guys are used to running things, and they came to work with the vision knowing that if we could be successful, we'd buy more deals. And we're out right now actively trying to acquire more deals so I can, put those people out to flight. But they won't work if you micromanage them. And some of the greatest ideas in the world didn't come from me. They came from my employees. Because you guys are on the forefront. And so if you're going to be a leader, you got to listen to them. Because sometimes they got the best way to fix something ever. An interesting book. You were asking about books. And I only read it because the Union High School business teacher wanted me to come and speak to some students on it. And it's called Santa Claus. I can't think of the name of it, but the book, if you Google Santa Claus book, it'll come up. And it's a small book with that in it, and it's a great book on that exact deal about letting people do, listening to your employees. But, like I said, I'm just going to say being blessed. I mean, we put it out there. And then I think you got to have a good marketing team. You got to have great social media, great technologies. We spend a lot of money in our business, coming up with the greatest, CRM tools, customer retention tools, where we can try to stay in constant contact with our customers through newsletters and email blast and text messaging and different things, and just try to stay in constant contact with our customers. The other big thing is for car dealers, for years, if you were a Ford dealer, you only wanted to service Ford cars. You only wanted to talk to people who wanted to buy a Ford. Day one, I told them I'll service any car. My service people are like, we don't know how to service everything, we need to get trained. If I sell you a Ford, most garages will have a Ford truck and a Toyota car. I can't do warranty work for Toyota, but I can do this. I can service that Toyota, and eventually, if I treat you right, I might get you out of that Toyota into a Ford. So I agreed we were going to service everything those had. We wanted to become your one-stop shop. You need tires, I'm your tire dealer. You want brakes, I'm your brake dealer. You need shocks, I'm your shock dealer. You need a new car, I'm that guy. You want your windows tinted, a bed liner, a bumper, a push guard, a radio, walkie-talkie, I don't care. They went in your car and had 4 tires on it, you brought it to me. And that was changing a culture that's not how they were designed to do. I had dealers say, well, you didn't buy your car from us, so we're not going to do your warranty work until all of my customers, they get theirs done first, and then we'll do yours. Are you kidding me? If you bought your car somewhere else, I put you at the front of the line. Because I wanted to sweep you off your feet so the next time, by gosh, you'd give me a chance to sell you your car. Just a different thought process than that. Any other questions? She's yes, sir.
How did you change the perception that, all car dealerships are dishonest people? How did you get it away from that and make it to where people respect you and act?
What do you work, sir?
Yeah. No.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Full disclosure, where do you work?
I work at CarMax.
Okay, I won't hold that against you. I think for me, I've always lived my life in I treat people the way that I want to be treated. And I think that where people miss it is you can't fake genuine. You're either genuine or you're not. You guys see it all the time. You go to school with somebody and you go, that person's a phony. Okay? I only surround myself with who I think are genuine people. And, I don't know that we'll ever change that perception because it's still out there. I just strive every opportunity to tell them that we have to always take the high road. Because at the end of the day, where you get bad reputations over one car deal. One. And my deal is I always tell them, if it isn't moral, legal, or ethical, or if you just get a bad check in your gut that it might not be the right thing to do, then don't sell the car, don't do it. Because if you get that gut check, in my opinion, it's wrong. Okay? And when a customer's unhappy, I just take the car back. I'm not going to argue with you. If you're not unhappy, I'll give it back. Because I don't need anybody out there, because one mad customer will tell 100. One happy customer tells 3. Okay? So understand that. And we spend a lot of times, we do new owners orientation clinics, for example. If you buy a new used car from me, every 60 days I mail everybody that bought a car and we invite them back to the dealership for a free dinner, and we get up and talk to them about who we are, the services we offer, why they should do business with us, how much we appreciate them doing business with them, and other services we offer them, and try to encourage them to kind of do it. And I would tell you that I kind of call it the Harley-Davidson effect. I didn't design that, but I think it's interesting that you can go to a Harley-Davidson dealership a Monday through Saturday, and there's tens, if not hundreds of people there, and none of them are buying a Harley. They already own one. It's just a cool place to hang out. And that's kind of the atmosphere we try to create, that it's just okay to stop by and have a free cup of coffee. You know, we're good people. Building a relationship with your customer is how you get rid of that, because everybody that you sell a car to is going through something. You got to be sympathetic, understanding, and we're car guys, and I'll say car guys, it's a term I'm going to use, CarMax guys, all car guys. They forget after they've been in the business for a little bit that it's the second largest purchase that person's ever going to make in their lifetime. It should be fun, it should be enjoyable, and they should really be appreciative that we help them accomplish what they want to accomplish. Because a lot of times people come in, they think they want one thing, and then they start talking to them, and you realize that's really, you know, I understand you think that's it, but let me kind of show you this other thing, because this would probably suit you better, okay? And make it fun and enjoyable. And we do that. And then we encourage them to send all their friends and family, and we try to make it to where they're comfortable sending people, and they don't mind to come back and drink coffee or hang out or whatever. And I'm going to tell you, I think you asked me how we differentiate, how we market. I call it the sphere of influence. S-P-E-R-E, I think is the proper spelling of that. For an example, my neighbor, where I used to live before I owned my dealership, we befriended each other as a neighbor. He runs a big truck company. I sold him a truck when I bought the Ford store. He introduced me to John Christner, who John Christner bought a truck, owns a big trucking company. Bobby Miller, whose family owns a big Miller trucking company out of Stroud, sold him a truck. Those two guys introduced me to their neighbors, and I sold them a truck. And those two neighbors introduced me to somebody else. And Charlie Anderson, one day we were in a room, and I was trying to set the example. I come up with 93 cars that was spurred from Charlie Anderson buying one truck from me. Okay? So my point being is it's network, it's sphere of influence, that everybody you sell a car to has a sphere of influence. Some people like Dr. Green might have a big sphere, and someone like her at her age might have a small sphere, but they all have those. And her sphere might only be this big, but somebody in her sphere might have a sphere bigger than Dr. Green's. Okay? You know, and that's the deal. You never know what the sphere of influence they might have with someone. Maybe one last one before she runs me completely out of here. Anybody else got anything? Yes, sir.
Why should I buy a car from you?
Great question. I can only tell you this. I'm going to make money on you. Because profit's not a dirty word. But I will tell you that I think you should buy a car from me, because I don't know anybody else in town will treat you with more respect and try to help you accomplish what you're trying to do any more than we will. Now, I got 126 employees. They're not always on, okay? You know, I always kind of reference it to the, you know, I'm a creature of habit. I eat at the same places. If you eat at one place long enough, you'll eventually get a bad meal, okay? But I had 8 good ones before I got the bad one, all right? You got to make a choice. You can give them another shot to make it right, because everybody has an off day, and that's kind of how I reference it, is I keep going back. And I got no better Fords to offer you than anybody else, but I think that we'll treat you with dignity and respect. We'll give you priority service. And, you know, we're always needing used cars, so I can get you into all these sales pitches. You know, I'll give you more money for used car. I'll get you better financing. You know, but really, I think it's just because I think you'd feel confident that you were treated with respect and that you got a fair deal. Because I got to make money to stay in business. So, you know, I'm not going to say a car and say, I'm losing thousands of dollars to sell a car. You got to get down here. No, that's not my thing, okay? You know. Anybody else? Hey, thank you very much for allowing me to come speak with you guys.